Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about blue-white spirits, how to play the deck, card choices in the deck, overall strategy of the deck, and why the deck is doing good. Because blue-white spirits, in addition to red-black sack, are kind of like the new hotnesses in Pioneer. The decks have existed in a tier 2 sense for a while, but after their success in the regional championship, these two decks have kind of risen to the forefront as the most winning decks in Pioneer. So let's talk about why that happens and the overall strategy of what's happening here. Let's do it. So Blue-White Spirits is, in essence, a disruption-based aggro deck. You're playing a bunch of spirits that do things other than like just being a body in the air. So it has evasion, so they can ignore creatures on the ground, but also like often do other stuff. So let's kind of talk about these different spirits first, and then we'll talk about these support spells. So let's kind of divide them up just a little bit. So let's talk about these different spirits. So first off, Mausoleum Wanderer is a 1/1 for 1 with flying. However, whenever another spirit enters the battlefield under your control, Mausoleum Wanderer gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and you can sacrifice Mausoleum Wanderer to counter target instant or sorcery spell unless this controller plays X, where X is Mausoleum Wanderer's power. So this is a really powerful spirit that you can play on turn 1 that gets bigger as you play spells. So often it's kind of like a 2-power 1-drop because you're probably going to play a spirit on turn 2 to pump it up, or maybe even a Lord on turn 2 to make it a 3/3. And it kind of acts as a Thalia effect for your opponent. It's only instants and sorceries, but it creates this situation where either they need to throw a removal spell into you sacrificing Mausoleum Wanderer, or they need to play in a way that they have the mana to pay for the removal spell, which is effectively like taxing. And then you don't even have to sack Mausoleum Wanderer. Just it existing can create this Thalia effect where they have to leave up mana to pay. Now, what's interesting too is we have a few flash spirits in Spellqueller and Rattlechange. Rattlechange's giving other spirits flash as well. So you can kind of surprise pump up the power of Mausoleum Wanderer and be able to like kind of surprise counter a spell, which is really, really powerful. Speaking of countering spells, Spellqueller has been around for a while. It's a 3-mana 2/3 flash and flying. It has 2 separate triggers. When Spellqueller enters the battlefield, exile target spell with mana value 4 or less, and when Spellqueller leaves the battlefield, the exiled card's owner may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So this is a flash kind of counter spell. You know, you put it under Spellqueller, and then when Spellqueller dies, they get to cast that card. But we don't really care about that because we're protecting Spellqueller with things like Shacklegeist and Mausoleum Wanderer and all these counter magic and other stuff going on. And we're really just about tempo, like having cards that tax our opponent, having flash spells so they can't really plan their next turn, and just like being able to kind of stop really important things that our opponents do until we're able to just eventually attack them out and kill them. One kind of interesting thing about Spellqueller is it has an old wording on the card. These triggers are totally separate from one another. So it is when Spellqueller enters the battlefield, exile target spell with mana value 4 or less is a separate trigger than when Spellqueller leaves the battlefield, the exile card's owner may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So that means if Spellqueller dies in response to the trigger, then the spell is exiled forever. Because what'll happen is the exile spell on the stack trigger will go on the stack. Spellqueller dies, which means when Spellqueller leaves the battlefield, the exile card's owner may cast that card without paying its mana cost, but there's currently nothing exiled with Spellqueller, so that goes away. And then the exile target spell with mana value 4 or less resolves. Spell gets exiled. There's no Spellqueller to kill anymore. Things exiled forever. So, just something to remember. It rarely comes up in paper because you just kind of assume that like it resolves and whatever, and then you kill it. But it can happen a lot on Magic Online, so just be aware that that exists. Rattlechange is an awesome card. 2-mana 2/1. Flash flying. When it enters the battlefield, target spirit gains hexproof till end of turn, so it's a great card where you can leave 2 mana up and just blank removal. And you can cast spirit spells as though they had flash, and like we said, that can make Mausoleum Wanderer better. That creates a situation where your opponent can't plan their next turn, you know, if things have flash and whatnot. Shacklegeist is another great card against creature decks, specifically mono green. This is the card that makes the mono green matchup much better as a 2-mana 2/2 with flying again. You can only block creatures with flying. We don't care about that because we're going to be attacking. And you can tap 2 untapped spirits you control to tap target creature you don't control, which means you can kind of like tap down things that don't matter, especially you can like end step tap something down while they're still summoning sick, because notice this is not a tap effect. This is just like, hey, tap 2 spirits you can control. It doesn't have to be Shacklegeist, and they don't have to be non-summoning sick. So, you know, you tap 2 spirits that are summoning sick to tap down a creature with reach, untap, be able to attack. Very, 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 very good. Also really relevant against like Blood Tithe Harvester. Blood Tithe Harvester, like you can only activate as a sorcery, and being able to tap down Blood Tithe Harvester when it matters is really important. Supreme Phantom is your lord. There's not much to say about that other than like, you know, being able to flash it in when you have Rattle Chains out can create like a lot of power out of nowhere, and making Mausoleum Wanderer 3/3 on turn 2 is really strong and whatnot. And Spectral Sailor, flash and flying, 1/1 for 1, and you pay 4 mana and draw a card. This is kind of our longevity situation. You know, casting a 1/1 for 1 with flying is like totally fine, but then if the game ends up going long, if they have a lot of removal spells or anything like that, being able to pay 4 mana and draw a card, especially in a flash deck where we're just like leaving counter magic up and stuff like that all the time, and then if they do nothing, we can just pay 4 mana. It's really important to have mana dumps in decks like that. So that's really our creature suite. We also have this Catilda, and I put it in a different category because Catilda is a little interesting. It's a 3 mana star with flying, lifelink, protection from vampires, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or enchantments. We have quite a few spirits and quite a few enchantments, so often this card's really big, but the issue is it doesn't have flash, and 3 mana is a lot when it's just a big girl. But it has Disturbed, and it turns into a legendary enchantment when you cast it from your graveyard, and it basically gives the creature all of the abilities, right? It has flying, lifelink, protection from vampires, +X/+X, number of permanents you control, spirits and or enchantments. And that's pretty strong. Being able to just have one of these just as kind of a fun of, right? They're dealing with cards. You can often win out of nowhere, right? They deal with a bunch of other spells, and, you know, you eventually cast Catilda for really, really big, or cast it from your, and then it kind of comes back, and it's just like a few must answers is pretty solid. It just doesn't get along with the overall strategy of the deck, so we're only playing this as a one of because it's kind of a Getcha card. Speaking of Getcha cards, Curious Obsession. A 1-man enchantment, who you enchant a creature, gets +1/+1, and has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't attack with a creature this turn, sacrifice Curious Obsession. The beauty of this card is if you are able to play Spectral Sailor or Mausoleum Wanderer, and then you Curious Obsession it, unless they have like pretty much exactly Fatal Push in this format, you get to draw some cards off of it, deal a bunch of extra damage, and then in addition to Curious Obsession, it's an enchantment. So like it can pump up a Catilda, it can make Geist Light Snare costs less, it can make it cost 1 mana. It creates a lot of situations where like you're able to like really easily protect the creature with Curious Obsession on it, and being able to draw 2 cards a turn is so good. Speaking of Geist Light Snare, we can talk about that one next, and as far as our counterspell and non-creature interaction suite. It's an instant for 3, but it costs 1 less if you control a spirit. Turns out we have a lot of spirits. And it costs 1 less if you control an enchantment. The backside of Catilda is an enchantment, and Curious Obsession is an enchantment. So sometimes it's a 1 mana leak. Counter target spell unless controller pays 3. Supporting that 1 mana, normally 2 mana, but sometimes 1 mana leak, which actually is really good, just like to kind of play out. And like a really nuts turn 1 is just like, they play like a tap land, and you just like end step Spectral Sailor, untap Curious Obsession, have Geist Light Snare in your hand, you know, you draw another card that turn because you jam with Curious Obsession on Spectral Sailor, and then they try to remove it, and you 1 mana Geist Light Snare, and it's just disgusting. It is so gross. We also have Lofty Denial, which is a 2 mana counter target spell, and its controller pays 1. However, if you control a creature with flying, a lot of creatures with flying in this deck, counter target spell, and its controller pays 4 instead. So it's just like a better mana leak, like a 4 mana. Pay 4 mana leak when we have flying, which is also very solid. And other interaction, we have Slip Out the Back. Put a +1 constant counter on target creature, it phases out. Just another 1 mana protection, especially in situations, Curious Obsession situations, or like Spellqueller situations. There's a lot of cards that we really, really don't want to die. And between Shacklegeist, the counter magic, Slip Out the Back, Rattle Chains, Slip Out the Back, Geist Light Snare, Lofty Denial, we have a lot, and Mausoleum Wanderer, we have a lot of ways to protect our spirits and really horribly tax our opponent. So that's the overall strategy of the deck. You're playing creatures that tax our opponent or make it awkward to play the game, while dealing damage and drawing a bunch of cards. As far as our sideboard goes, we have Catilda to just kind of get them against those decks. This mostly good, you know, in decks that you're going to like flood the board pretty quickly and be trying to kind of get our opponent in that situation. Catilda's really bad against decks with a lot of removal, but very, very good against a lot of other stuff. Portable Hull for things with permanents that cost 2 or less that we care about, aggro decks and like mono green, things like that. Declaration Stone for creature decks that we're really worried about. We're playing 4 Wedding Announcement for decks that run a lot of removal and we expect the game to go long. Wedding Announcement is very good. And Takacia's Welcome is kind of wedding announcement number 5. Whenever one or more creatures mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. It's just another wedding announcement. Just allows us to play that long game a lot easier, especially in conjunction with wedding announcement. We go to Takacia's Welcome, wedding announcement. Things are entering the battlefield every turn, so we draw cards. Disgusting. Skyclave Apparition is another thing that exiles permanents, getting permanents that we are worried about off of the battlefield. Aether Gust being a pseudo counterspell for red or green things, especially like mono green and whatnot. And then Disdainful Stroke if there are any decks that we're worried about mana value 4 or greater things. If you like this video, want to see more deck techs like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social media. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching, especially check me out on Twitch. I stream most days. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.